Dad left me our house when he died, but my mom kicked me out to live with her new family. 15 years later, I tried to take my house back, but they're threatening me, so I brought cops. I am 24M. Let me start off by saying I was kicked out by my mom because she needed to impress her new husband. Okay, if kicked out seems a little harsh, we can say she moved me out of my own house and made me live with my grandparents, father's side. I have all the good memories from when my dad was alive. Unfortunately, we lost him when I was 7. As a kid, I felt devastated. I was very close to my dad, and sending him off inside a coffin broke my heart. I still remember that moment very clearly, and it saddens me to this day. While I was still processing the loss, my mom showed up with another man and insisted I call him Dad. I was like, no way. I don't know if I was right or wrong, but it just didn't feel right to call him Dad just a few months after my own father's demise. After that first meeting, I often found him in my mom's bedroom, and it was difficult to see how quickly my mom had moved on. She didn't even wait for a year before bringing my dad's replacement into the house. I was not ready to accept him as my dad's replacement. I had recently turned 8 when they planned their beautiful wedding. They had put up a pretty huge wedding for second-timers. Anyways, it was none of my business. She left me with my grandparents as she went on her honeymoon. A month passed, but she didn't turn up. I kept asking my grandparents when mom would come to pick me up, but they didn't have any answer. Then suddenly, she showed up one day. I was so excited to see her after so long. I rushed to hug her, but she had brought all my belongings to dump me at my grandparents' house. I was heartbroken, to say the least. I lived with my grandparents until high school. I was happy with them. My mom used to show up sometimes only to tell me how much she loved and cared for me. Sometimes, I used to question her that if she loved me so much, why had she dumped me at my grandparents' house? She had no answer. She would try to cover it up by saying, "Oh, your grandparents are turning old. They need a helping hand to run their groceries and take out their trash." It was much later that she admitted the actual reason. She had given my room to her stepchildren. Bill, mom's husband, had 2 children who moved into our house with him after their wedding. My mom prioritized her new family over me. It was natural for me to become resentful of her. Eventually, I stopped bothering her. After high school, I moved out from my grandparents' house, but I still visit them often. They were my saviors. They raised me, and if not for them, my childhood would have been ruined. Now, I'm 24. After working for a year in marketing, I thought of starting my own venture. I needed capital for that, so I thought of leasing my house. Oh, if I didn't mention this before, there's a bummer on the way for my mom and her loving family. Actually, the house in which they are living belongs to me. Yeah, that's right. My dad made a will on his deathbed, and he very meticulously gave me every penny he had, including the house. I was a kid when his lawyer read his will after the funeral, but with the look on my mother's face, I can surely say that she was not liking it at all. Later, I got to know that she tried several times to overturn the will, but she lost every time. My dad had made the will very precise, that the house would be mine, but I could sell it only after I turned 21. Until then, no one could touch the property. My grandparents think Dad probably foresaw Mom's plan, and that's why he made such a rigid will. Otherwise, she might have manipulated me in my childhood to give away the house to her. Last month, I called Mom to inform her about my plan to lease out the house, but she didn't answer my calls. This week, when I went to meet my grandparents, I told them I was planning to make some extra bucks from the house. They gave a weird reaction. I asked them what was the matter. They said I might have to face a lot of resistance to vacate the house for Mom because her stepdaughter is pregnant with a teenage boy who has run away from his responsibilities. Also, Bill has lost his full-time job and is working at a store in the evening. So basically, they are in bad shape financially. Now I really don't know what to do. I mean, I also need that house now. I have quit my job and I need capital to start my business. Picking up from where I left off, like I said, my grandparents informed me that Mom and her family were going through a rough patch, so they might not vacate my house easily. I thought I'd inform Mom about my plan and give them a few months' time to get their life together. Initially, I was thinking of giving a month's notice, but knowing their situation, I thought of giving them 3 to 4 months. Since Mom wasn't answering my calls, I went to meet her at the house. The house was nothing like before, and neither was my mom. Both had a cold vibe. Maybe she had sensed the motive behind my visit. When she saw me at the door, She gave a fake smile and a half-hearted hug. Mind you, we were meeting after almost a decade. Yeah, she had stopped visiting me after I entered my teenage years. I had turned bitter toward her, and why wouldn't I? Even though we met after so many years, she didn't bother to ask how I had been. She wasn't interested in knowing anything about me. It was like, oh, you're here. Must have been something important that brought you to my door. The pleaser in me said, oh no, nothing important.
Just came to check on you.
It's been a long time. She smiled and said, sure it is. A wave of silence followed for another 5 minutes until I stood up to leave. It was definitely unpleasant. I didn't feel welcomed at all. Besides Mom, my pregnant stepsister was also home, and she too gave me a very bad look, as if I was there to create some sort of trouble. For the moment, I dropped the idea of taking back the house. I explored other means of arranging the money for my business. But then, Mom crossed all limits of narcissism. Last week was my dad's 15th death anniversary. My grandparents held a small prayer ceremony at the church. Since I was in town, I decided to have a decent ceremony by feeding the poor and giving gifts to underprivileged children. I invited my friends and relatives for the prayer. I emailed the invite to Mom as well, but she didn't respond. When I traced the history of the mail, I found she hadn't even opened it. This was my first mail to her, so I thought it might have gone to her spam folder or something. So, I showed up at her house again. This time, Mom wasn't home. My stepsister, Brenda, answered the door. No hello, no greetings, just a straight question slapped on my face. You're back again. What's the matter? I said I was there to meet Mom. She replied, with the way she spoke to you last time, do you think she wants to meet you again? She said it so bluntly that I was taken aback. I spat out that I was there to invite Mom for the prayer ceremony for my dad. She chuckled in my face and said, that was like centuries ago. You're still holding that up? Get over it. I said, excuse me? He was my dad, and it's none of your business to comment. She rolled her eyes and pushed off to her room. I sat there like an idiot for a few more minutes, and then left a note for Mom on the table. I asked her to call me back. She called me the next day, and I told her about the prayer ceremony. She remained quiet for a minute, and then said she wouldn't be able to make it because she had to take Brenda for a checkup. That was a bummer. I mean, she could have at least said she would try, but turning it down outright was disappointing. I replied sarcastically, yeah, of course, they're your priority. We are no one to you, so be it. Good luck raising that narcissistic woman and her bastard child. She flipped out because I used that word. I said, why would I be nice to her when she was so mean to me? She made fun of my emotions. To defend her, Mom said, it's natural for her to get furious. You can't talk about death in front of a pregnant woman. You're such an insensitive dud, just like your father. The moment she said that, I lost my mind. I yelled at her, saying she shouldn't talk trash about my father. If anyone here is insensitive, it's you, the way you talk about my dead father. You said he's history, so don't bother coming. My father wouldn't want your prayers after seeing your true colors. I hung up the phone. That same day, I hired a lawyer and started the process of sending a legal eviction notice. The lawyer took some 15 days to validate my dad's will and sent the notice to Mom. As expected, when the eviction notice reached them, she freaked out. Apparently, she never thought I would go to such lengths. She left me a voicemail, which I laughed at, and then I blocked her. When she couldn't contact me, she showed up at my grandparents' place. I wasn't there at the time. Oh yeah, I'm living with my grandparents again until I put my life together. My mother requested my grandparents to convince me to withdraw the eviction notice. My grandparents are calm and kind people, so they didn't throw her out. They said they didn't have any say in this and that it was my property and I could do whatever I wanted. Fair enough. That answer didn't go well with her, and she blamed my grandparents for raising me as an entitled brat. Really? What was she smoking when she said that? Asked my grandma why she didn't say anything to my narcissistic mom. My grandparents said, we don't want to mess with such a woman. I sighed and replied, well, I want to mess with her, and now I'm not going to let them live in my house for one extra day. I had given the eviction notice as per the tenant laws in the country. Though they weren't tenants, they weren't paying any rent to me. On top of that, I was the one paying the property taxes every year. So legally, I was entitled to throw them out right away. My grandparents, being God-fearing people, talked me out of this idea. They said, for the sake of the Lord, give them that 1 month to find another shelter. There's a pregnant woman there, and we shouldn't pull her into the streets. I sighed again. She doesn't need any help. She's equally toxic. My grandparents replied, so be it. She might be a sinner, but her unborn child is not. Don't be cruel to that little creature. They convinced me to wait, else I was adamant about evicting them that very day. The next day, I got a call from Mom. I ignored it, just as she did to me when I was trying to reach her earlier. She messaged me saying it was urgent. I responded, check out my calendar and meet me at my grandparents' at my open slot. This didn't go well with her. She sent me a long reply accusing me of trying to throw weight around. What did I do with her 5-paragraph email? Nothing. That's right, I didn't respond. She might have gotten the hint that I wasn't going to give in to her pressure. Throughout my childhood, whenever I used to cry or throw tantrums about wanting to go home, instead of loving me, she would scold me and ask me to behave. She would terrify me into being a good lad and not throwing tantrums. This was her parenting style, and it worked. To keep her happy and not mess with her, I would stop sobbing. But after she left, I would sulk in the corner of the house for hours. Not anymore. It was her turn to sulk now. But sadly, she wouldn't even have a corner to herself. When she came to meet me, I deliberately made her wait for an hour. She got anxious. I asked my grandparents to stay out of it. She kept asking them about me, and they simply said they didn't know anything and swiftly retreated to their rooms. When I finally arrived to meet her, she gave me a look that screamed, "Asterisk, where the hell were you? I've been waiting here for an hour, asterisk," but she didn't say anything. She sat there with a straight face. People in her situation would have tried to please me, but she remained solid on her grounds. Okay, let me start. I can't sit here forever. I have jobs to do. I murmured under my breath. Oh, sure you do. Finding a house is a difficult job. She gave me an annoyed look and said, "What is this notice about?" I replied, "It's written in English. I'm sure you can read it. Or, do you want me to do that for you?" She was absolutely pissed off. She threw the notice at my face and said she wasn't going to vacate the house on the basis of some stupid notice. After she was done yelling, I calmly said, "Then let's wait and witness the repercussions of not following a court order." She was furious. "I gave birth to you. Don't you try to outsmart me. That house belonged to my husband, and no one can throw me out of there." I responded, "Surely a legal heir can." I was responding to her calmly to piss her off, and she did get pissed off. But the moment she referred to my dad as her husband, I lost my mind. Really? You have the audacity to call him your husband when you skipped his prayer, saying he was history? You don't deserve his house. You are just squatters, and I'm going to free that house from all the leeches. She stood up and said, "I've been nice to you so far. Now, you'll have to deal with my lawyer." I laughed and said, "Sure, by all means. We still have 20 days to go. Let's see what next you pull from your sleeves." I gave a 30-day notice to my mom and her family to vacate the house. She tried gaslighting me and using every tactic she could think of, but I shut her down. However, the next series of events were pure narcissism from her and her family. Could you believe that her stepdaughter, Brenda, came charging at me? She even threatened to press a harassment case against me, playing her pregnancy victim card as if being pregnant allowed her to do whatever she wanted. I told her, pregnancy is not a ticket to get away with your nonsense. She even tried to mess with my grandparents, but we showed her the cameras installed around the house. I warned her, "If you set foot here again, I'll have you arrested." Then came my mother, rushing to defend her golden stepdaughter. She accused me of mentally torturing Brenda and said she would sue me. I calmly replied, "Let the judge decide, based on the camera footage." When she realized she couldn't win through force, she mellowed down and started sobbing. She blamed herself for raising me wrong and brought up my dad, saying it was his fault for dying so early and not giving me a proper upbringing. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. If anyone is to be blamed, it's you, not for raising me wrong because you never raised me at all. My grandparents raised me and they did a great job. You should feel sorry for abandoning me, but honestly, I'm glad you didn't raise me. I see how you raised Brenda. In a moment of frustration, I even brought up Brenda's teen pregnancy. I know it was out of line, but I was furious. Naturally, my mom got angry and started yelling at me. Realizing I'd overstepped, I went quiet. Then I told her firmly, "I'm done with this. I just want my property back. I've let you live there for free for so many years, but now I need it. I've quit my job and need the money to start my business." She flipped out. "You're throwing us out just to let strangers live there?" I replied, "Those strangers will pay rent. If you agree to pay, you can stay." That made her lose it completely. She yelled that I was putting money above family. I countered, "There's no family here. You threw me away like garbage and barely checked on me all these years. On birthdays, Christmas, and Thanksgiving, you barely showed up. And when you did, you made me feel like it was a favor. What kind of mother does that? A mother like you." Her anger boiled over, but I was done. I told her I didn't want to talk anymore and that my decision was final. She stormed out, and I thought that was the end of it. But, of course, it wasn't. Her husband, Bill, entered the picture next. He left me a voicemail saying, "You don't know who you're messing with. I'll knock you out if you show up here again." The dude is big, sure, but he's also dumb. He handed me evidence against himself with that voicemail. I didn't respond. Instead, I went to the police and filed a report. My lawyer accompanied me and requested the cops to come with us on the eviction day. Initially, they were hesitant, saying they'd intervene only if there was trouble. But with some persuasion and cash, they agreed to escort us. When we arrived at the house with the cops, my mom, Bill, and Brenda started yelling and cursing. Bill even came out with a hockey stick, but when he saw the cops, he backed off. The cops handed them the eviction notice and told them to leave. They tried everything to stall. Brenda cried about her pregnancy, but I stood firm. The cops asked for my final decision, and I said, "No extensions." They begged for a day, and I said, "You have 3 hours." Bill tried to intimidate me with his size, brushing his shoulder against mine and glaring at me. The cops yelled, "Get moving. More packing, less glaring." By the end of the day, they handed the keys over at the police station. My lawyer suggested I file a restraining order, which I immediately did. The cops explained the consequences of violating it to them, and the defeated looks on their faces were priceless. Now the house is finally mine. I've put it up for lease and am hoping to get a good deal soon so I can start my business. It's been a long, exhausting journey dealing with their toxicity, but I'm free now.